Generally speaking, on an active level 4 yard, a real serious prison yard, there's a hands-off policy. What this means is that if you have a problem with another inmate, regardless of how angry you might be, you cannot put your hands on them. You can't fight with them. This is because if they're an inmate of another ethnicity and you get into a fight with them, it's not just going to be you and him, it's going to be everybody of his gang and your gang. It's going to be a war. Hundreds of people could fight. People could die. Conversely, if it's a member of your own ethnicity, your own gang, and you get into a fight with him, then the two of you could be harmed. You could end up in the infirmary or get in trouble and go to the hole. Either way, it's two fewer people of that group who are ready for the riot if it does happen. It even happens sometimes that somebody might know a riot is going to happen and not want to participate because they're afraid of getting stabbed or killed. And so they go and get into a fist fight with somebody on purpose so they'll get caught and get in trouble and go to the hole in order to avoid the riot. As a result, it's a very strict policy that you don't put hands on another person, regardless of how angry you are or what the cause was, unless you have approval from your gang, the shot callers. There are 3 types of violence that are sanctioned by the gangs. They don't count as part of the hands-off policy. There's the soft check, the hard check, and the removal. I've talked about the soft check and the hard check in previous videos. I've explained what they entail and when they would be used. A removal is far more serious. This is what the gang does to you when they're done with you. Go ahead and call it a gangster retirement plan. They will inflict the greatest amount of harm upon you that they can within the circumstances. They'll use knives if they can get them. They'll use their hands and feet if they cannot. I witnessed a removal as a result of a riot that I also witnessed whenever I was housed in 4 Block at High Desert on B Yard. I'd been in my cell, and whenever you're in your cell, even if the door is locked, you can see out because there's a window that you can stand at. And I'd been watching the inmates in the day room. I'd noticed one inmate, Surenos, named Jamaica, with whom I was acquainted, who was walking around with a bag of his property in one arm and a 16-ounce Folgers jar filled up with what was obviously Pruno, inmate-manufactured wine, in the other hand. He only had about 2 weeks left to serve, and it was pretty obvious what he was doing. He was going around trying to sell the stuff in his bag, the property he'd acquired over the course of his term, for money to get wine. Unfortunately, Jamaica was a little bit of an aggressive drunk, you could tell. He was being just a little loud, just a little rude to everybody that he spoke to. And I was watching because it seemed very out of place and people were becoming progressively more upset at him. Until finally he went up to a white guy and you saw him raise his voice and kind of just get emphatic that the white guy needed to give him some money for his property he was selling. The white guy stood up and said something back. I couldn't hear it, but it must have pissed Jamaica off because he dropped his property and punched the white guy in the face. This was a big deal. This is 2 inmates of separate ethnicities with hands on. It was on and cracking. Over the course of 3 seconds, people went from playing cards or talking or watching TV to trying to kill each other. In some cases, it was literally 2 guys playing cards with each other, leaping to their feet and fighting. That's what it means whenever a riot kicks off on a 4-yard. It doesn't matter if it's your friend or not. If he's the wrong color, if he's a member of the wrong gang, it's on and cracking. The riot only lasted about 5 minutes. That's about how long it takes the riot squad to put on all of their gear, get their shields and their batons, and run across the yard to wherever the riot might be. And of course, during this time, more officers were trickling in, 2 or 3 at a time, pepper spraying inmates, firing their block guns, which are cannons which fire brick-sized beanbags and can knock a person unconscious, doing what they could to gain control of the situation. The worst thing that I saw during this riot was 2 white guys that had managed to knock a Hispanic guy to the ground. And they were putting boots to him. They were kicking him in the head and the torso pretty hard. They were charged with attempted murder. However, as it turned out, these charges were later dropped because this riot had been caught on videotape. And whenever the administration reviewed the videotape, they determined that the whites had been the victim of the riot. The Surenos had started it. This was great for those 2 inmates. It meant that they weren't going to pick up a bunch of time, have to go to trial for attempted murder. It was very bad for the whites as a whole. There was official paperwork that said we were the victims of a riot. We were the victims. That's a very big word in prison politics. The only way that we could fix this would be to find some way to demonstrate that we weren't punks, that you couldn't just attack us and get away with it with no consequences. It was going to be the start of a war, probably. We were going to have to assault the Hispanics, they'd assault us back, it would go back and forth. The white shot caller had a conversation with the Sureno shot caller about what could be done to prevent this. Nobody wanted that to happen. The Surenos shot caller essentially said, hey, we're sorry Jamaica did that, but we didn't approve it. We're sorry, we didn't mean for it to happen. And the whites essentially said back, prove it, make this right. And they did. It was 2 days later, whenever the Surenos were walking to dinner, and a clump of about 12 of them descended on Jamaica. He was knocked unconscious, and his fellow gang members kicked him in the face, the chest, the legs, anything they could. I have to assume he had teeth knocked out, broken ribs, a fractured skull. These were strong men kicking him while he was unconscious. This was a removal. This was a gang retirement plan. He was no longer in the gang after this. These were his friends, the people that he had programmed next to, that knew he was paroling in just a couple of weeks, that did this to him. This was the bon voyage from prison and from gang life. And if you think about it, Jamaica made a pretty small mistake. He got belligerent and loud and aggressive whenever he was drinking. It's a mistake I think a lot of people have made. But the stakes in prison are very high. A small mistake can have far-reaching consequences. Of course, that's true in everyday life, too. You can make a mistake 5 minutes, and it can impact the next 5 months, 5 years of your life. It can ruin your life. You can cheat on your wife, ruin your marriage. Mouth off to your boss, get fired, not have a job. You can be driving along, lose focus for just 5 seconds, think of something else, and end your life, or perhaps the life of somebody else. The stakes in life are very high, and we don't notice that just a couple of moments of not paying attention, of not being the person that we want to be, can have devastating consequences. And if you doubt that, just ask any of the 100,000 men in California prisons. Many of them made mistakes over the course of moments that they will pay for the rest of their lives.